Hello everyone, this is Donnie, aka Elevated with Dota Alchemy. Thank you so much for tuning in again today. And today's video is going to be another one of those philosophical videos that many of you love and some of you definitely hate. But anyway, we're going to talk about the word intentionality and why being intentional with all of your actions is a mandatory part of reaching that next level in Dota 2. I came back to the game after about a week and a half break of not playing, but I was feeling pretty good and I was super motivated to play because it had been a little while. However, I had forgotten a lot of the things that made me a reasonably decent Dota player because, frankly, when you get out of practice and when you're doing other things, you often forget the little tiny habits, especially if they take actual effort to employ during your normal play. And for me, the biggest thing that I noticed after grinding out about 25 games, 30 games or so, and losing most of them, and losing several hundred MMR over the last week and a half, is that I had completely forgotten to be intentional with basically everything that I was doing in the game. The thing is, I calibrated significantly lower than I was last season, and to me, that meant that I should be able to basically autopilot my way through these games to get back to where I was. However, the thing about Dota is that everybody goes into a game generally trying to win. And that means that if you are not actually trying to win, there is a much higher chance that you are going to lose. And if you are not putting your full effort in and the other team is, there's basically no chance for you to actually come out victorious. And that's why a lot of the time it can seem like when you go on one of these big losing streaks, that all the odds seem to be stacked against you. But in reality, a lot of the time, it's something that you are doing that is making all these games more difficult. And for me, that was the fact that I was on autopilot, whether it was by choosing or just simply because I was out of practice. A lot of the things that I was doing were just kind of instinct or not even really conscious decisions that I was making. I'd see an enemy, I'd go to kill the enemy. I'd see a creep, I'd go to hit the creep. I'd see a tower, I'd go to push the tower. But there wasn't any actual intention or reason for doing these specific actions. And likewise, my picks were just like, I like this hero, so I'm going to play this hero. Or I have a general feeling that this hero seems okay or good in this game. But there wasn't a whole lot of like, breaking down what makes this hero good, whether it's actually good against the heroes that they have, what it brings to the team dynamic, or anything deeper than just a sort of baseline level of positive feeling about a hero pick. And likewise in the gameplay, I was having the same kind of things. I felt like I was laning well. I felt like my mechanics were okay, albeit a bit rusty, but at the same time, the general sense that I was getting was that I'd hit creeps, I'd get gold, I'd feel pretty good, I'd get some good items, but then we would end up losing the game. And all of my games were feeling really, really hard, which didn't make a whole lot of sense because, frankly, I'm at a lower MMR than I'm used to playing at currently. So today, after playing several games, I finally snapped to the realization that I had basically just been autopiloting. And I had really not been purposeful in any of my decisions. I wasn't really taking the time to check items as regularly as I normally would. I wasn't really checking on my teammates as much, and I was kind of just playing the game as in, I got to get my farm, and because I'm a better player than the people I'm playing against, I'm going to win the game. And that was about as deep as my reasoning went, which didn't make a whole lot of sense to me once I made that realization that that is how I've been interacting with the game of Dota 2. The thing is, Dota is not a deathmatch game, and despite what most people and what most pubs may feel about the game, it really has nothing to do with kills and killing other people. Dota is a deep strategy game that centers primarily around things like maneuvering and outsmarting your opponents. That is what's so important about the game, and that's why it's so important to play with intentionality, because you actually have to have a purpose behind every move you make in chess. Otherwise, you are going to just randomly feed away your pieces to the other player. Likewise in Dota, if you're just going to the nearest creep camp and hitting it, you're probably going to die eventually. Or if you just happen to see a fight and you don't bother to look at whether it's a good fight or where the fight is or whether you have the right ultimates or health and mana or anything to be able to win the fight, then if you're just going because there's action there, you're probably going to lose a lot more fights than you win. Every action needs to have a reason. And that's a lot of work. And that's why a lot of people tend to autopilot in many of their games. And that's why many people tend to stagnate. Because what I find is that if I am actively thinking about every single decision that I make, the games feel so easy. Because there's a logical progression as to my hero pick. There's a logical progression as to how to play the laning stage. If the lane's hard, I simply play more defensively. I get what I can. I know that my team is having better lanes because there's less resources focused on me. And if they're not having better lanes, then I need to reevaluate how I'm itemizing. I might need to go for significantly less greedy items or more utility. Or if I notice that one of my teammates is building a Hand of Midas, which is pretty popular these days, or maybe all of my teammates are building Hands of Midases, then probably I shouldn't build a Hand of Midas, and I should build something that is going to allow us to actually maybe defend our towers while these 4 Hands of Midas eventually bring our team online. And that's the thing, is Dota is an ever-changing landscape every single time you get into a game. Just because you've counterpicked their heroes doesn't mean that you automatically win the game. Your job's not over. Just because you've gotten 6 kills as a support in the early stages of the game doesn't mean that your job is over. Just because you have gotten good farm, maybe you got a fast battle fury, maybe you got a 6 slot on your carry, doesn't mean that your job is over. You haven't done enough to win the game until it's actually over. And that's the thing, is myself included, many people make the mistake of feeling like they have done enough. And that's, it's an acceptable thing because many of us play a lot of games of Dota. And I noticed that I was feeling more and more prone to autopiloting the more games that I played. In fact, after the 2 games where I really realized and focused in on what I had to do to win the game, by the way, I won both of those games. I played one more. I was feeling a little bit more foggy mentally, perhaps, but at the same time, I thought I was okay to play the game. Turns out, I definitely wasn't, because once the laning stage kind of broke down, it was a little harder than I thought. I realized that I didn't really have the awareness capable to make good calls and help captain my team, which is something that you really have to do in pubs, because most of the time, people don't take the initiative to actually make calls or, come up with a plan to actually end the game. So all I'm trying to say is that when you enter a game of Dota, you really need to enter it with intention. You want to queue for the game knowing that you're committing yourself to basically thinking about every single possible thing that you're about to do for the next 45 minutes. And that is what you're getting yourself into. And that is what makes Dota so hard, but it's also what makes Dota so possible to excel at and to have very, very strong control over the outcomes of your game. There's so many different little nuances to the game, and there's so many different ways to react to things that are happening. And as Jenkins and I have talked about many times in our videos, if you take a active approach to the game, you don't say, woe is me, this is happening to me, my teammates are feeding, my Legion commander's in the jungle, my Wraith King is going Midas Radiance and he's not buying any support items, even though he said that he was going to support in the picking phase. These are all things that could happen to you in the game, but it doesn't mean that you're the victim of them. They're just scenarios that you can then actively think about and change. For example, if you're a Lina in the mid and suddenly your position 4 decides that he's going to play a core, why can't you just suddenly become a support Lina? It's possible. You could just buy some more wards. You could not go for aggressive killing items. You could buy utility. You could simply just buy the item and be in the place that allows your team to have the best chance to win. And it's up to you to figure that out, and that requires you to actively think about the actual state of the game. All of this begs the question, how do you develop intentionality? Because this seems like quite a bit of work, I'm not going to lie. And the best answer that I can give you is that you need to just ask yourself questions. This is something that I have talked about and Jenkins and I have talked about in our streams before, but basically just really ask yourself why, or is this right, or should I be doing this, as many times as you possibly can during a game, especially if you aren't sure about a decision, sometimes you just know, okay, I have to buy a BKB here. I really need a Ghost Scepter. But other times you might think, well, I kind of need an item that's going to give me some damage or some mana regeneration, but then you don't really have a super strong feeling and you just kind of default to maybe your habitual item. And every single decision that you make that is better than average is going to mean that you will play better than average. And since Dota is a game about averages, where the team that averages less mistakes every single game will usually come out on top, if you can consistently make above average decisions, you are going to climb the ranks of the matchmaking system. And we've gotten a lot of questions about, what should I practice? What hero should I play? When should I play? What region should I queue in? Should I play party? Should I play solo queue? And the true answer to all of these questions is simply do anything you want, but do it with intention. Come up with an idea about the game and then be willing to change that idea throughout the course of the game or throughout the course of the week as you maybe figure out that a hero isn't as strong as you thought it was, or an item build isn't as good as you thought it was. And once you've made a decision that seems to be logical, just commit to it. Because if you find yourself hesitating constantly, it's very hard to actually accomplish anything. I think that one of the biggest examples of this is in a pub game, you have a good early game, you kill all of the tier 1 towers, and then suddenly the game grinds to a halt because the tier 2 towers are much more difficult to take, and generally there isn't aggressive enough vision, and people don't itemize in a way that allows them to take more difficult towers. They simply fall back to the easy route of, and the habitual, the autopilot route of farming their side of the map because the enemy team is not there, and then things kind of just progress randomly from there, depending on who decides to actually take initiative and either invade the jungle or, make a play for something of actual value. Ultimately, all I'm trying to say is that for the next 5 to 10 games that you play, you should absolutely make sure that you are really thinking about all of the decisions that you make. Really think about who is important in team fights. Really think about where the wards should go. Really think about who actually is your win condition, because chances are it's not always you, even if you pick a safe lane or a mid hero. Really think about what makes your team strong, not just yourself. Really think about what makes the enemy team strong. And don't just focus on one individual hero. Think about the bigger picture and think about how you fit into it and how the actions that you are going to execute in the game fit into that picture. And if you can do that, and you can do it consistently every single game, you are going to be an incredibly powerful Dota player. So thank you so much for listening to me rant and watching this video. Thank you so much for being a part of Dota Alchemy. Good luck, have fun in your games, and we'll see you in the next one.